Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me on Zoom. Again, we have a small audience here, but hello to everybody on Zoom. I'm guessing you probably know who I am, but Jeff Kenney, Museum and Archives Manager for Culver Academies. I'm also on the board of the Antiquarian Historical Society of Culver. Let those buzzes get through. Okay, so we were talking about a number of programs that I could do, and this one was selected. This is really the first time I've done it for an audience really outside of the Culver Academies campus. So I tried to make it not so just an internal audience interest kind of piece, but I think most of us like cartoons and comics regardless, and so these are fun things. And there's a kind of universality to the humor of cartoons, and that's no coincidence. Just to kind of give us some background and context, comic art, kind of the art of the comic strip, is satire, humor, commentary, social commentary. I mean, it goes back to 18th, well, earlier, arguably, depending on how you define it, but certainly 18th century England, and William Hogarth was kind of known as one of the founders of this sort of approach. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. Rudolf Hopfer, the father of the modern, I guess I did try, the father of the modern American comic, not American, the modern comic strip in the early 1800s. And the Glasgow Looking Glass was a publication really specialized in comic strips at that same time. It really hits America closer to the later 1800s. The Yellow Kid was an early American comic strip, humor strip. I think a lot of us may remember the Captain Jammer Kids. They go back to the early 20th century, and they were one of a spate of early kind of comic strips. So, all of this is an evolving form. There's sort of the short little pieces in newspapers and periodicals, and those are going to eventually be collected, which is really a different point. They're going to be collected in special books that we would go on later called comic books that become their own art form. And of course, that kind of morphs into animation, right? So, Disney obviously is the giant of early animation, but didn't really pioneer it, but early. So that's a little bit off topic, but just some context. And I think most of us are familiar with the fact that, this seeps into periodicals and publications in most schools. So I think if you go to most schools, in addition to small town newspapers and all that, comic strips are somewhere, or some kind of comic strip art. These are Culver Academy, at the time, Culver Military Academy, of course, founded in 1894. These are just examples of kind of where you find these pieces. They're little caricatures of senior pictures of the students, of the cadets in their yearbook. Little comic strip commentaries in the regular newspaper that the school published from its student body, which at the time also went out to all the alumni and kind of was widely distributed around the country and even the world. It's called the vedette. Vedette is a word that means sentinel in kind of a military parlance. So the vedette even continues today as the student newspaper, but it was really quite an operation in its heyday. So most of these cartoons come from the student vedette. Just to evolve it forward, this is the 1960s, but I thought this was a fun little find in one of the yearbooks. One of D Company's more popular extracurricular activities. You can see them reading Action Comics and Superboy. They're sitting around reading comics. So kind of the evolution of this graphical art form, right? So I kind of separated this into segments, sort of thematic segments. This is more just kind of the baseline. Some things never change. This is just sort of campus-like humor. So we'll just run through a few of these. Even as early as 1904, you can see this cadet here, the first lesson after vacation. He's back from holiday break. What's he dreaming of? His girl back home, right? So of course, at this point, the school is an all-boys military school. Hasn't been for many years now, all-boy, but in those days, all-boys. So that's a common theme, right? Wishing you had a girl around. Another 1904, probably a little hard to see, but up here is an interesting little caricature. This is, at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Genelec. So Genelec is a commandant starting in 1897. He's going to become superintendent in 1911. And he becomes a brigadier general, and he's really the kind of a giant who helped promote and really gave structure and form and vision to the school for decades. So he's portrayed here in this kind of Keystone Cops humor, right? The horse doesn't want to move, and the Black Horse Troop, which again is probably one of the more prominent facets of Culver Academy, is its horsemanship program. 1904, Sir, all present. So there's a lot of humor about barracks life, right? So there's someone coming into the room to inspect it. And of course, you see cadets hiding all around the barrack room who aren't supposed to be there. A scene at chapel. Hate to say this is universal across the board. These guys are asleep, looking attentive, but they're sound asleep. Chapel. I bring this guy in, Edward Clark, just because he's such a good cartoonist. I don't know that he went on to do much after Culver, but you can see he has this kind of iconic style that's really trendy at the time. This is you see the 19-teens. He captures a lot of moments in the school's history, which we'll get to later, but he just has that style that I think of later cartoonists like R. Crumb in the 60s and 70s, but it's a style that I think we all kind of recognize. So it's kind of hard to read. There's a lot of it to read, so I'm not going to try to do that, but just an interesting style. You can see miscellaneous drill. He's kind of making fun of the disorganization that inadvertently happens when trying to get people together to do these organized things. Yeah, so I'll show regular guard, again, just kind of sampling his art. By the way, one of the fun things that happened in the last few years on the campus, some of you may remember the Culver Inn, which went down in 1991. And part of the Culver Inn was the Shack, and it was an old, I mean, it went back to the 1870s, originally run by someone from Plymouth, actually, named Palmer. But the Shack was recreated recently within the last few years on campus by a group of donors. And one of the things that's featured in the restrooms is they actually carved some of these cartoons into the wall. I mean, they carved them by hand, right? But they fabricated cartoons like this. I know at least one of his works is on the wall. So we're starting to reopen the campus. So if you can get into the Shack and get a burger or whatever, it sounds a little weird to say go to the restroom and take a look, but it's there. This is another recurring theme, is that when cadets leave campus, and they're supposed to be in uniform unless they're on vacation, of course, but they're supposed to be in uniform. So cadets are sometimes short of money. Why not bellhops during the busy season? So there's a lot of jokes about, you're in a movie theater, they think you're an usher, that sort of thing. 1924, again, a lot of themes of holidays. It's December, he's marking down the calendar, he's thinking about his girl back home and just having fun, and if his pants are too short because he's grown, that sort of thing. Which will it be? The two most uncertain things we know of: women and Indiana weather. Remains not about women, but the Indiana weather thing remains true. There's at least one in every company, the vain student who's obsessed with his own appearance. And again, holiday theme, that train home being pulled by a snail. This is 1925. The varsity rifle team takes up squirrel hunting. The squirrel is not worried, as you can see. 1929. This is, it's not something we think about a lot. It's a beautiful campus. And I think most of you have been to the campus. If you haven't, come visit. The caption says, "Have that inmate feeling when visitors are brought to the door of the library in the Memorial Building." The Memorial Library, the library is now moved, but it's maybe even arguably more beautiful. But certainly folks coming in to visit the campus, and you're sort of, in a fishbowl, being observed. 1929, A Story Without Words. So here's this guy, the little guy who's earned one stripe, and now he's a little dictator, right? So the bigger guys. Another common theme, of course, is you're going to be awakened in the morning by the reveille gun and/or a younger student, a first-year student they call the call boy. They still do this today in the mornings and evenings. It was interesting. I had barracks inspection duty a few years ago, and it's always interesting to see, just to hear them. They'll say they have to sort of stand in a position in the barracks. Again, this is a first-year student, and say, notice, sirs, 15-minute call to tap, sirs. So, you can just imagine the irritation in the morning of hearing this little guy shout at you. This is another common theme in the cartoons. The griper. Here he is on campus. Punk food, art studies, rotten school, no recreation. At home, Culver's a great school, snappy uniform, wonderful education. 1930, this one, Culver Minute movie, suspend firing. So they're having a snowball war. Commandant walks by. Everything's quiet. As soon as he's gone, the snowballs start flying again. This one I don't really have context for. I just thought it was cute because it mentions Burr Oak. Twinkle-toed Vanderkloot passes through Burr Oak at an astonishing speed while returning from his first class leave. So he's probably late coming back from break. Photo from the Borough Bugle, which is obviously a joke. Of course, the little train town on the way between Culver and Plymouth Borough. I just always think every Christmas time, I think this is a nice evocative little cartoon. He's just running to catch the train on the holidays as the snow is falling and ready to get to break Christmas time, 1936. 1938, how would you go about taking this position, cadet? He's completely surrounded by guns pointing at him. The wages of sin is breath. This never happens anymore, thankfully, but this young man apparently has been smoking, and he's got Listerine to clear his breath. Thank goodness nothing like that ever happened. Speaking of smoking, sometimes they would take, popular imagery. This is from advertising Pall Mall cigarettes at the time. Had this campaign with the person featured holding up the Pall Mall. You can see they've taken a specific cartoon and put it into the Culver world. It says, "Field problem with apologies to Pall Mall cigarettes." It's 1940, and they're out there doing something in the field. Jumping ahead a little bit to 1964, only one more day of classes. That's hard to believe. Quick, you guys got to help me. What's a good subject for an English term paper? Yeah, common, every school. This one's a little surprised this made it in. What a disgrace. Not only did I flunk AM demo, but I've been put in remedial sex ed. 1964. Same year. This is another riffing on one of the sort of things that happens on the campus, which is there are a lot of acronyms. He says, after GI, the OC will okay the VOC permit from 0930 to 2330 hours for DRC, SRC, ANMF, and tax. So what does all that mean, right? GI, general inspection, OC is the officer in charge, DRC is dinner roll call, SRC supper roll call. So there is a meaning to all this, but the campus is full of acronyms, and you can get lost in the alphabet soup, as this little character is. This one I kind of included because it's cute. You can tell he's parodying or taking off of the Peanuts. So this is 1965. Peanuts comic strip's been around about a decade at that point, and it's just getting on television. You can see the art style is obviously the Peanuts style, and he's hearing the call voice say, "Notice, sirs, reveille is sounded, sirs," and he ends with the panel saying, "Darn call boy," that I mentioned earlier, waking him up. This actually, there was an interesting little article in the the alumni magazine in the 1960s, early 1960s, on responsible cadet humor. But I have to say, the artist they chose to kind of showcase as having responsible cadet humor was one of my favorites, Stephen Pikich is how that's pronounced. He's got an interesting story. His mother came to work for, there's some cartoons about this, came to work for what was then known as the mess hall, the dining hall on campus in 1958. Up until that point, the school had a waiter system. There were waiters. Up until that point, all of them were African-American waiters. So there's a whole other story there I've done programs on about the African-American community in the town of Culver that kind of centered around these folks working at the school. Well, in 58, that ends, and they go to the contemporary, current style, cafeteria style eating. And the Stouffer's company ran the dining hall for several years. And so his mother worked for Stouffer's. His sister would go on to marry someone who a lot of you may know from the Culver, Plymouth area, but also from the school. That's Jeff Honzik, who goes on to become horsemanship director in the 1980s. Unfortunately, she passed away far too young. But his family name is going to be changed and sort of anglicized to Pike. He and his family, his parents started the Three Sisters restaurant. So north of Culver on 17, where Jeff's PWC is today, was a really popular restaurant in its day in the 50s, 60s, the Three Sisters. So he was a really talented cartoonist. This is 1961. You can see, again, that style reminds me a little bit of later years of Ziggy. He's got a saber because the officers carry sabers. He says, "That's going to cost you rank, Herman," and he's got the saber through his body. We'll see more of his in a little bit. This is another one. He's at the Logansport gate. Someone's saying, "Stand up, pull your shoulders back, look proud. Aren't you proud of your school?" And when the victim of this turns around and says, "Huh?" and it says Culver Cab Company. So again, it's this joke about who's wearing a uniform and being mistaken for a cadet or vice versa. 1968, this cartoonist had a number of cool cartoons. The alumni come visit. That, of course, still happens every year. This place isn't the same Culver I went to. It's really going down the drain. And there's a little voice there that says, they think Culver's changed. They're all old. Again, universal to all high school students virtually, right? The last them free, he's gone through the Iron Gate, which is the traditional graduation kind of gateway, well, not kind of, gateway for cadets. The girls today have the graduation arch. And of course, there's this little monster down, big monster down here with the word college, ready to catch him in the bag. Discipline. I never could figure it out. What is the purpose of the plebe system, says one cadet. Self-discipline, of course, you idiot, and they're all laying around in the grass. Yeah. This would happen, you know, about every 10 years, an admissions film, pretty highly produced admissions film, going back to the 1920s, is produced by the school. And so there was one shot in around 1970, 71, and you can see they're saying, just act natural. They've got cameras and lights all around this teenager. Christmas at Culver, jingle bells, get a haircut, jingle all the way. The commandant's passing in 1970. Of course, that's a reflection of the times, right? And we're going to get into that in a minute, sort of history as told through cartoons, but this is the hippie era, the Vietnam era. So there definitely was some campus unrest a little bit, and hair length was certainly something people tried to push the envelope on. 1972, a rare happening at Culver, enjoyment at chapel, because they're singing a Christmas carol. And the chaplain is saying, my God, they're singing in the Christmas mode. Another Christmas one, you know, he's saying cough, cough, cough. He undoubtedly has contraband cigarettes. What's in the bag, lad? Says the commandant. One of my favorites, 1974, everyone's in the dining hall and the polo player walks in and there are little stink lines coming off of him because, of course, he smells like horse. And a common theme is romance. We'll zip through these. 1919, death would be an easy verdict. When you first discover that the 10 you loaned your buddy, he used to bring your gal down for the hop. So the hops and dances were a big part of the culture of campus. They still kind of are, but they used to have one for, you know, there were actually four times a year formal balls on campus in full dress and girls would be brought in as a big group and, you know, in formal wear. And so these were, you know, we were a pretty big deal. And of course, if you could get your girl from home to come, that was even better. A lot of times it was a big, giant blind date. 1919, when a fellow needs a friend, that was a comic strip of the day, when a fellow needs a friend. So they parodied that. Telegram, awfully sorry, but won't be able to come to the dance, Jane. Again, with the uniforms, the nerve of those ushers trying to flirt with us. It's hard to read. She says, not so good, dearie. They're from Culver. So they're not ushers, they're in uniform. This poor guy is wishing his coat was his girlfriend. 1925. Jack, do you prefer John with his do you prefer John with his uniform on or without it? Gene, what an embarrassing question. Misconstrued. Common theme when there's, I mean, again, it's an all-boys school. You didn't have women on campus very often. So you see eyes right, which is a military parade term, right? And of course, you know, they're just watching the girl go by. 1929. This is one of my best. After all, it's not so bad. She says, my hero, how many lives did you save? And he's got a hygiene medal on. So this is another one. If you know the campus, sally port. A sally port is common to military forts and even police institutions. It's really just the portal through which you enter and leave. But on the campus, sally port is a significant kind of landmark. And the girl is saying in 1930, and just who is this Sally Port? But a couple of good-looking girls stroll down Pershing Walk. Of course, Pershing Walk's named for General Blackjack Pershing, who visited the campus in 1922, and it still is named that today. And again, this theme of being excited the girls are on campus. But sir, my girl gave it to me. He's wearing a scarf. It's totally non-regulation, 1945. That Thanksgiving fix up my roommate's little sister. He's smaller than the girl by a head or so. 1958. Gee, Santa, just what I've been wanting for the past 4 months. Another Christmas theme. Ready to see his girl back home. So he's leaving Culver. Goodbye, Culver. Big college dance night. Here I am, girls. He's got a flag that says Borough Tech. And as soon as he's left campus, the girls are gathering around the cadet in uniform, which he's no longer wearing. So he's bummed about that. And all the way up to 1986, return to the Ice Age. No males beyond this point. It's a girls' dorm, Argonne and Rheumatory, and they're both standing outside freezing. That still happens today. And a quick, just a few from the summer school. So of course the naval and woodcraft camps. Today, aviation, cavalry camp goes way back to the summer. It used to be 8 weeks, 6-week program. When the cannon was fired for the first time. So I used to take my little daughter through campus, and we often inadvertently be near the cannon when it's being fired, and it just always made her cry, and it's so loud. Just, obvious things in the summer. They're desperately wishing they could get some ice cream and a cool shower. It's hot. The trooper before and after the big hike. So the big hike starting in 1907 when the cavalry camp began. Really 1908 was the first one. Was these are called the 100-mile hikes. The summer cavalry would go on literally about a 100-mile circle. And it used to be these shots are color slides that someone sent me from 1954. I thought our audience might enjoy this. This is in Plymouth. So they hiked through Plymouth. See them on South Michigan Street, near I believe that's near the train station. No, that's McCord. And then over there is Heister's Grocery. I'm not sure if anyone knows where that was. So I thought those were kind of neat to see them. I'm sure that was a spectacle to see dozens of horses riding through town. 1964, I don't think I'll join the band next year. This is a summer one. Why not? I'm very susceptible to seasickness. And it says on the side there, Fowler. So the Fowler is when it was built, today, we believe, the largest 3-masted ship on inland waters in the United States. Today it's the R.H. Ledbetter. It's been turned to the metal instead of the original wood hull. But the Moonlight Serenade is the reference here. You can see the moon up there. That's an annual event that goes back to 1943. When the naval band serenades people around the lakeshore. Just did it this past July every year. And major events in history. This is a cartoon. There are a couple of cartoons by this cartoonist who's well known, John Tinney or J.T. McCutcheon, and he was known as the Dean of American Cartoonists. He wrote poems and did cartoons for the Chicago Tribune. In his heyday, it was very sought after. So he came to Culver and spent time. The campus used to host a literary society day every year in the summer, and he was one of the folks invited. General Genelec reviews the famous Black Horse Troop at Culver. This is the old riding hall in the background, and they're doing all sorts of rough riding stunts, which still goes on today in some form. And another variation on the same theme. You can see the movie tone camera there, which did happen. Fox Movie Tone News would come down and produce newsreels from the campus. And this is another interesting one from our friend Clark from earlier. This is student camp. So this is an important historical point here. Starting in 1915, the school, Culver Military Academy, was given clearance from the U.S. Army, in fact, supported by the U.S. Army, to train students and then later Culver alumni, essentially to prepare them for World War I. We had not entered the war yet until 1917, but we saw it kind of coming. So Indiana, all around the state of Indiana, high school teenagers were brought to the campus. There's a plaque commemorating it near the chapel, and they were trained by Culver cadets and Culver personnel to be more war ready. I mean, they're not ready to go into war, but so as we call them schoolboy camps. That's an important point because it gets Culver, not only it helps get Culver on the national stage, because Genelec was a pretty prominent figure in the preparedness movement of the day, but also gets us designation as one of the first ROTC schools when ROTC starts right around this time. So you can see these are actual photos from the student camps. You can see these are just high school kids. There are kids from Plymouth, from all over the state. And there's General Genelec inspecting Camp Woodrow Wilson at the Academy. There's a 1915 program. This is one of my favorites. This is 1916. So 1916, well, really 1915, and there's a plaque on campus commemorating. There's a terrible fire. There was a horse stable. There were 66 horses in the Black Horse Troop at the time, and the stable catches fire. They just couldn't even begin to touch it. It just burned down just very quickly, as you can imagine, with wood and hay. So, you know, this little cartoon is kind of making a little light of a bad situation. It says, as mother and father saw the fire, there's their son. He's got a fire extinguisher in one hand. He's leading the horse safely away. They say, I always knew him to be heroic youth. Isn't he a brave lad? And he's saying, come, fair one, I will save thee. And in the next strip, the next panel, how John saw the fire. Hey, aren't you going to try to save your horse? No, I'm too sleepy. So, terrible. But this is based on a sad actual event. These are photos from the fire, kind of pleasant. But the whole troop, all the horses died in the fire. Colonel Rosso, I actually portrayed Colonel Rosso here at a ghost walk in this building a few years ago. Colonel Rosso was quite a storyteller and raconteur. He was a veteran of the Spanish-American War. He was the founding director of the Black Horse Troop at the school in 1906. And he went on to become commandant of cadets and hold a number of positions. But he was a wonderful storyteller. He wrote a number of pieces, and it says, Colonel Rosso recites some of his thrilling experiences. He ought to write a book. I think the joke was he was writing a book. He wrote Tex Raine's Culver Trooper, which is kind of a youth adventure novel in the mid-1950s. And he also he had a manuscript that didn't get published in his lifetime, except in sort of essay form in different magazines and newspapers. That was collected into a book later in 1994. All Hail the Mariners is 1928, who saved Logansport from the Great Spring Washout of 1913. That's the Logansport Gate. Of course, they're referencing one of the stories we still tell. I'll tell it to students this Saturday, to the students about the 1913 devastating flood that crippled the whole Midwest. And the mayor of Logansport called Culver Military Academy because many of the students had been rowers in the naval school, trained rowers. So they went and saved around 1,500 people in the city of Logansport over the course of 2 days during this spring 1913 disaster, which killed a lot of people. So that's part of the lore. And of course, the Logansport Gate that's still on campus is donated then by the city of Logansport as a gesture of thanks for that life-saving effort. And it continues to be a portal on the campus today. This is the beautiful, one of the most beautiful buildings on campus. I don't have a picture of the outside here, but the Legion Memorial Building, which outside is modeled after the first Monceau Castle in England. And the inside, as you can see, beautiful limestone interior. This is a 1928 panel preview of a couple of 18-men at the class reunion. And they're telling war stories because, of course, 1918 is the end of World War I. So these are guys who would have served in World War I. And they're coming back. And this building has been built to honor the Culver Academy graduates who died in World War I, the 86 Gold Star men, as we call them. And so they're still honored there in the building today. And in fact, when you enter the building, or to salute or put your hand over your heart at the Gold Star embedded in the cement there. Another one it's a historical little storytelling piece, 1929, broadcasting. So there's a lot of little silly things going on, and what they're referring to is this, which is radio station WCMA. So this is the early days of radio, 1920s. It's just getting off the ground. There are two large towers on top of the recreation building, and even today, if you go to the recreation building, the space is still here up on the balcony where the radio station is located. And it reached 15 states and a handful of foreign territories because there wasn't a lot of competition. These are days of AM radio only, so it had a wide reach. So one of the, it was a fairly regular roster, and I sometimes would run into people who say, oh, my grandparents played music or sang on the radio. So they would bring people in from around surrounding communities to perform on the radio. One of the visitors whose son was at Culver and got kicked out was Will Rogers. And Will Rogers got on the radio and made the joke that in order to graduate from Culver, you have to be able to spell Max and Kenny and Genelec. Another scenes of long ago. They're they're saying they're at the train station. Where to? Chicago and all points west. They're going to Chicago to see this movie called Pep and Prep. This is a 1929 script. So what's Pep and prep. It's the first Hollywood movie shot on the campus, first of a handful shot on the campus of Culver Military Academy. It's a silent movie that actually comes out in 1928, and it's kind of a flop, frankly. It also was, you know, the days of silent movies were fading, so it didn't have that going for it. Better faring are some later movies that we'll touch on in a second that came out a few years after this, but this was the first one, and we don't have much left. It's lost to history. So it's on the lost list of films that deteriorated due to the nitrate film that they were on. But speaking of comics, this is not an internal to Culver Academy comic, but this is a fascinating little piece of history, I think. Extremely rare to find. Movie Comics #3, June of 1939. It's the comic book premiere of Gene Autry, famous cowboy star. But basically what this comic book did was take movies of the day and put them in comic book form. Now I remember as a kid before VHS, that was a big thing. Like you had a comic book of your favorite movie, it was the best you were going to get. So this was probably fun for kids. But one of the movies they put into comic book form was The Spirit of Culver. The Spirit of Culver is the second of the two sound movies that come out in the 1930s that are shot and based at Culver Military Academy. The first one is Tom Brown of Culver, released in 1932. It's a Universal Studios movie, directed by William Wyler, who's going to go on later to do Ben-Hur, which is the most award-winning film. I think it's still the most award-winning film in history. It's not, you know, second. But and then that film was reshot in 1938 and released in 1939 as The Spirit of Culver with Jackie Cooper, you know, big star of the day, and Freddie Bartholomew. So, in fact, again, the Plymouth audience, there's a fun scene that's not in Tom Brown of Culver where they're needing to go help somebody, and so they get on motorcycles. They're going to drive to Plymouth to catch the train at the Plymouth train station. There's this whole scene in Plymouth that happens. Another bit of Culver history: the Motorized Infantry passing in review, and you see that the thing doesn't even want, the car doesn't want to drive. They're sort of pushing it along. This is a reflection of actual, you know, some history. Now the vehicles worked, okay, but these are military surplus. That, you know, there was a motorized infantry which was an innovation. They used to use the horse-drawn caissons, you know, the rolling stock of weaponry that were pulled by horses. So this was an innovation in the late 30s. Bill Malden, if you know World War II history and or comic strip history, he was the prominent cartoonist of World War II, right? There are books collecting his stuff. He's really kind of a legend. You know, you see a lot of he's the guy that puts humor into World War II. And this is a strip he did. I beg your pardon, I didn't know you was a captain of Culver. So this is a common theme. There are actually a couple of movies that riff on this same thing. The Shores of Tripoli has a character who keeps talking about how he's a captain of Culver, and he's kind of a, you know, kind of a jerk, and they sort of make fun of his arrogance. But I don't think it's meant to be a knock on Culver, but you can see this little guy was a captain at Culver. Just a couple of, you know, folks who did cartooning on the campus who went on to some prominence. L. Comer Jennings really became a highly regarded Atlanta artist, and he did work for the Olympics when they were in Atlanta. And he was a cartoonist while on campus. Here's one from 1942, where you can see again this scheme of there's a girl on campus, this guy's turning around to look at her. Notice, sirs, 5 minutes still call for SRC, sirs, which is set for roll call. Kid's not ready, so coat's off, and he doesn't have anything on under his coat but his undershirt. 1944, and why the devil didn't you close that window last night? Indiana Winters, right? There's a polar bear in the barrack room. And there's a little caption of this. Comer Jennings, last year's ever popular man of all art, drew the Christmas cartoon above, especially for this issue. He's already graduated. Thanks and Merry Christmas, Comer, on behalf of the Corps. Again, common theme. Our hero, while he's a plebe at Culver, there he is shaking, and he's a little guy. He's like sort of a nobody, but on his holidays at home, he's another person in regalia never seen at school. He's showing off his medals, uniform. I mentioned 1958 transitioning to cafeteria dining, and there are several cartoons on that theme, but I hardly touched it, sir. And there's juice or whatever flowing all over the floor. I just had to throw this in, even though he's a graduate in 1925, there was a little piece in the 1960s. Rick Yeager, one of the four-man team who drew and produced the famous Buck Rogers, the 25th century comic strip, has presented an autographed Buck Rogers drawing to the Marshall County Historical Society Museum in Plymouth. Now, I won't ask if anyone knows where that is, but it's been, you probably do. It's been over 50 years. He's now drawing two other cartoons, Grin and Barrett and Captain Dick. So he's, yeah, let's see, he's now reviving the nearly forgotten art of scrimshaw, the old sailor's art of engraving and carving on shells of whale's teeth. He was a graduate of the Naval School at Culver in 1925. Byron Humphrey is another one who graduated from Culver Academy, who went on to renown. He was a well-regarded cartoonist in for the I think it was New Orleans Times-Picayune. Here he is drawing at Culver. He did some nice stuff, and he also produced. He had a career doing comic strips for a lot of national magazines as well. He says, now let's go to Beeson and get the news behind the news. And Beeson is the senior hall hangout, senior hangout. So they're reading the Vedette and they want to hear the real gossip. Here's another one of his, pretty good. Now we come to the barrel assembly, muzzle loading, recoil absorber, sear pin, spring, vertically situated left outboard, double acting retainer, lock nut, screw holder, hammer deactivator. So of course they're in ROTC class and they have to memorize this lingo about the gun. Not a student, but Burr Schaefer was another regarded cartoonist. You can see some of his books that came out, and here he's visited Culver and he did a little panel about Culver Plebe. J. Wesley Smith prepares for government inspection. He's got the gun pointing right in his eye. Here's another one that kind of touches on history. Okay, boys, now just look at the catapults and pretend there are no cameras. 1972. This is a reference to Colonel Roos. Was a Latin instructor for many years at the school, and he would put on this Latin Roman centurion regalia and stage sort of ancient Roman stuff, including catapult wars. And this actually made it to NBC national television in the 1970s, so this became a competitive thing between schools. They actually built these classical, 2,000-year-old style catapults, and had wars. And there's another little photo in one of the newspapers where the cadet is injured. It's probably the first catapult-related injury in many years. This one's from 1973. The next unit is Culver Military Academy's Black Horse Troop. Now you see them, now you don't. They're watching the presidential inaugural on TV, of course. And that is the 1973 inaugural. The school starts with Governor Thomas Marshall from Indiana, who becomes vice president in 1913 under Wilson. And Culver is invited to escort him on Pennsylvania Avenue during the inaugural parade and does it again in 1917. There's a break. We get back into the inaugurals in 1957 for Eisenhower II, and have been at every one except one since then up to today. And so they're making a joke about the fact that, in fact, I believe it was 73, the South Bend affiliate that was going to carry the parade preempted the Culver part with romper room. So there was a joke about that. Girls on campus, I know we talked about romance. This is a little different. Here's a joke from 1917, a joke, this comic strip, when Culver is a co-ed school. So they're making light of this idea that it's all military and what would girls be doing in a military school. So, that's kind of an interesting sort of precursor to what's really going to happen. In 1957, the first two young women were admitted as students. They were faculty daughters only at that point, and they actually would graduate with Culver Military Academy diplomas, although they didn't do the military stuff. And they graduated in 1959. And this is Piketch, who I mentioned earlier, he does some fun riffing on this, because there are now a few co-eds on campus. So he's saying, looking out the window saying, what a doll, like way out, man. And then someone else says, she's a co-ed. And so they go, co-ed, oh, she doesn't send me. So the joke is they don't like them because they're now, I don't think that was necessarily accurate, but I'm sure there was a bit of that vibe. There's maybe some resentment. This is the same kind of theme from Piketch again. Oh, Herman, there's a pretty girl. This is Mom here for Mother's Weekend. There's a pretty girl. Why don't you dance with her? You kidding, Mom? She's one of the school's 9 co-eds. So what? She's still very pretty. Yes, but they're not like the girls in the big cities. She says, what do they teach you here, son? So they are riffing on this. I have come to this 1967. I've come to the philosophical conclusion that co-eds are just like girls on the outside. No, everything of Culver is depraved. Girls on the outside look like this. We cadets are cruelly depraved. It's deprived, not depraved, deprived. You know, they're riffing already on this idea. In fact, a little voice down there, Culver will enable its cadets to take their place in the world. That world would be extinct by now. So you can see it's late 60s, times are changing, Vietnam is getting underway. There's a move afoot already, and that's gonna come to fruition. 1969, co-education is feasible, but creates some problems. This little cartoon, this is Henry Harrison Culver, who's the founder of Culver Military Academy in 1894. And you can see his roads are military plus co-ed, just plain military, no military plus co-ed. Those are your choices. So what they decided to do, and you can see, this is the Iron Gate I mentioned. This is the graduation portal for cadets. And there's a girl here digging, and she says, we'll make it through the Iron Gate one way or another. And this is really timely, because of course, well, really 5 years later, this is the 1976 photo, the CGA graduation arch. So Culver Girls Academy, originally called Culver Academy for Girls, opened in the fall of 1971. By 75, the name was changed to Culver Girls Academy, and the arch is open. By the way, this is Lynn Rash, who's the first graduate of Culver Girls Academy to become a Dean of Girls. She's the current Dean of Girls, lives in Plymouth here. Many of you may know Lynn. Once they do open the school with co-eds on campus, she says, I just love to run my fingers through your burr. It's got the short haircut. And New Dorm was the name of the dorm. Today it's Benson Hall, that was built specifically for the girls coming to the girls' school. And you can see it's 1974. He's hammering mistletoe over the door around Christmas time of the girls' dorm. And that brings us really to a really timely moment in history. This year, this school year, we're celebrating 50 years of Culver Girls Academy. It will culminate in May with a big celebration. So what I have, and it can entertain questions. I don't know how that works in Zoom. Our questions.
Sometimes.
I got a comment there.
Okay.
WCMA radio station. As far as I know, that's still in operation in Louisiana.
Oh, with the same call letters?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
As far as I know, I haven't done any checking on it for several years.
I might add that the towers that I showed, the antenna towers, were when WCMA shut down. It didn't last really long. I think it's 33. They stopped broadcasting. Colonel Rosso that I mentioned, when he retired for a time, he became commandant of the Indiana State Police, or director of the Indiana State Police. So he actually took those towers to the Indiana State Police headquarters, and they had their first, as I understand it, their first long range broadcasting for state police radio use from those towers. So that's kind of another interesting little one.
Another comment too. The museum here just fairly recently received that hot collection of photos.
Oh, Hoppy? Yes.
Hoppy, yeah.
Chester
And,
Hoppy's
Yeah,
photos.
Chester Hoppy. There are two pictures, which I believe be Academy boys marching through Plymouth area.
Oh, nice.
And these photos date from about 1920.
Okay.
The one photo is on Lake Avenue, where it makes a little jog right there where it crosses the tracks.
Sure.
And the other one is by Michigan Street Viaduct.
Are they in a parade?
Yeah, well, I can't really, I don't think it's a formal parade, just a garrison move or something like that. But I can remember when I was a kid, this was in the early 50s, they do their parade or garrison moves out through Gibbard.
Okay.
Come up the road there at Gibbard, go out east of town, sometimes they go north.
And this isn't the 100-mile hike, though.
No, I don't think it was.
Winter school.
I was pretty young back then. I remember they had horses sometimes. Well, I had horses and vehicles both.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know there were a lot of parades. Some we don't. That I had trouble documenting. I mean, the town of Winamax getting ready to kind of commemorate the centennial of its swinging bridge, which is a veterans bridge, 1923. And they said, oh, we would like a contingent from Culver there because they were there at the dedication, and I couldn't find any evidence. They had the evidence in the newspaper article, but my point being that Culver went out a lot and did, now those sound a little more like maneuvers, kind of things to give them some training experience, but they did a lot of parades, especially with Genelec as the war had ended. And it affected him very deeply personally. In fact, he commissioned an artist to do, some of you may remember when we did the centennial of World War I, to do portraits of the Gold Star men who were killed. And, you know, that was a very hallowed room he created. So he knew, you know, it affected him a lot. So he did a lot of, whenever there was a World War I parade or commemoration, you know, if he could, he would always, I know it seems that he always got cadets involved and tried to support that. So yeah, I'm not saying that was what was happening here, but it wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, those photos of the cadets, I'm pretty sure they're cadets. Because the way they're in formation and stuff, and they only got caption on those pictures, it's called the boys.
Culver boys. We get a lot of those, yeah.
Chester Hoppy did a lot of photographs of the military academy and the buildings and everything.
Okay.
And we just received his collection not very long ago.
Okay.
But my question has to do with, were all of the comics that you showed us, the cartoons that you showed us, were they all published in the student paper?
Yeah, all except, I mean, the ones I mentioned that were national.
Right,
like
right.
I should have mentioned the Gene Autry was published by DC Comics, which does Superman, Batman. They weren't called that then, but that's who it was. But no, they were. Most of them were student newspaper. A few were in the roll call, which is the student yearbook. So occasionally it'd be yearbook, but most of them were in the student paper.
How often did that paper come out?
It varied. I mean, through most of its career, it was bi-weekly, but then it went to a monthly later into the 70s and 80s, and now it's sort of occasionally. You know, it's a few times a year. Digital, that's a mess for everybody. How do you navigate digital versus print and all that? But yeah, it was bi-weekly, so it was a very rare, and really, I mean, it was a good paper. It was a great historical record. It was very professionally done, and it went out to a lot of folks. So, any Zoom questions?
Does anyone have any questions on Zoom? Feel free to unmute yourselves if you do. Doesn't look like it.
Doesn't look like it. Make him stop. So, okay, well, I hope, unless there's anything else, hope this has been at least somewhat enjoyable. Oh, I will just mention, if I can allow a free plug, if you're interested in history, I believe it's September 19th. It's that Saturday, 1 to 3 p.m. There's a cemetery walk that the public library is sponsoring, and we're portraying a number of folks from around Culver, including August Winterstrom, who was the Titanic survivor. I'm portraying him, who worked at Culver Military Academy, starting the year after the Titanic disaster until almost to his death. I mean, it's a lot of local folks in Culver will be portrayed that I won't go on. But anyway, it's a free event.
And when is that?
And I believe it's September 19th, Saturday 19th.
Winterstrom, my dad, very good friends.
Your dad with August Winterstrom. Yeah, there's
Both at the same time.
at the same time, sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a Titanic story there, as we know. And, you know, a friend of his that planted maple trees to honor his children and died on the ship right outside of Culver. So yeah.
Well, thanks, Jeff. We really appreciate you being here as usual. Fascinating. Fascinating.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
See you
Well, come
next
back.
time. Yeah, thank you. Be happy to.
All right, I'll be ending the Zoom now, but thank you all for coming in.
Thank you for having it.
Thank you.